Welcome to All Hallows Kino, where all month long Mister Kino talks horror movies. So welcome to the Kino Cave, and today I am covering the Phantom Carriage. So, for those of you who don't know, because this film doesn't seem to be very popular, outside of like the sphere of snobby film students, but the Phantom Carriage is a silent film from the 1920s which is pretty influential. It's one of the first ever horror movies. It's a Swedish film. This movie is an inspiration for a lot of later films and filmmakers. Ingmar Bergman, I think that's how you pronounce his name. He cites this movie as a great inspiration to him becoming a filmmaker. For those of you who don't know, he made The Seventh Seal and a lot of these other really influential films. So it's like, this movie influenced a director who made a bunch of other movies, who then influences movies later on and then influences movies of today. So you can kind of backtrack like the inspiration of filmmaking back to some stuff in this movie. A more direct inspiration is a specific scene in The Shining where there is a certain door that gets chopped down by a certain axe. Point is, this is a really influential film. So I came across this film because I had to watch it for one of my classes in college, and I knew that as soon as I turned it off, I really had to talk about it because this film had a real effect on me, I think. I know that the silent era of filmmaking isn't very popular, not anymore anyway, and I'm not gonna sit here all snobby and say, oh yes, I appreciate real cinema because I've seen silent films and I like silent films, so you could not possibly be on my level of appreciating cinema. So I'm not the biggest fan of silent films either. A lot of them can be quite boring, a lot of them can be too long, there's no sound design or, well, there's dialogue, but it's all intercut with title cards. They're difficult movies to get into now. Obviously they were amazing at the time, and because it was all brand new and interesting. And there are some stuff from the silent era, like watch any Buster Keaton stuff, because they're all like 30 seconds long and they're all really, really cool to look at, just watching this man punish himself. Like, he was Jackass before Jackass. It's amazing. But traditionally, silent films, they work on the same level as like films nowadays, except there's no sound, which can be a problem. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I love silent cinema and that I'm a great appreciator of cinema because I've seen a bunch of silent films. I've seen a few silent films. Pretty much every single one I've had to watch for college, for writing essays and shit like that. And the three that I enjoy the most, or the three that I would watch again, are Nosferatu, which is awesome, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, which is, again, a really influential and quite popular film from that era, which is actually pretty good. I was not expecting it to be anything. I was sitting down and dreading watching The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. It ended up being a really enjoyable experience. And now, The Phantom Carriage, which is probably my favourite silent film. It's brisk, it doesn't really get carried away with itself, which a lot of silent films can do, and it's just got really interesting concepts and amazing special effects. But I'll get into that in a sec. So I am going to go non-spoilers and then spoilers for this, in case you do want to watch it, because obviously this is not a very popular film. I never would have even heard of this film if it weren't for having to watch it for a European cinema class. So, if you do care about spoilers for anything, I'm not going to spoil it for the first few minutes of this video. To start out, the special effects are genuinely incredible. You have to think about movies like this, I think, considering the time that they were made in. You don't need to do that for every movie. You don't even need to do it with this movie, but I feel like you'll have a better time with this movie with that context. This is from 1921. This is 102 years old, this movie, as of the time of recording this. And the special effects, you can kind of see one of them in the background. They are fucking incredible. The ghost effects with the intangibility of the Phantom and the carriage and David Holm as a ghost. It looks better than it does today. Like, people try that effect now and it doesn't work because they try to CGI it or put a haze over it. The special effects with the ghosts in the Phantom Carriage look real. It actually looks real. Like, if I was a lot more stupid and didn't know that this is just a movie, if you showed me it and said, yeah, that's real, that's a real ghost, I would have been like, fair enough, I can't disprove that. But we can, because history. More just really interesting things that this film does that I found really awesome are the tinted color scenes, to kind of give you an idea of the time frame that this certain part of the film is based in, because this is a film that plays with time. It goes full Christopher Nolan that way, just like 70 years before Christopher Nolan. And so you have flashbacks, and then you have flashbacks within flashbacks, and especially for a silent film where you can't go, ooh, and then you're in the past. You can't do that in silent films. So what is done here, see, on the spot research as always. Oh, fuck that. I'm going to put the filmmaker's name up here somewhere because I do not know how to pronounce that. I actually do have a Scandinavian friend who pronounced it for me once. I've forgotten that, so I'm going to make my best attempt. I'll probably just use his first name throughout the video because I don't know how to pronounce Storstrom. Storstrom? I'm going with Storstrom. So, what Victor Storstrom, what he does very, very well is to communicate the time frame that the specific part of the film is based in. He uses tints. So, as you can tell, this is not the light messing with the TV or anything like that. This scene is actually colored blue because it's like ghostly and it's nighttime and stuff like that. But then there's other parts of the film that are tinted yellow. There's other parts of the film that are just plain grey. It all depends on the nature of the scene, what time the frame the scene is taking place in, whether or not there's ghosts in the scene, all that kind of stuff. And it's just crazy that this film has really good color design before films were even in color. Films weren't made in color until the late 30s, early 40s. And this film's just taken that rule that everything has to be in black and white and just going, no, fuck you, I'm gonna have tinted film cells, and that way I can have color design in this movie from 1921. The point is, this is incredible for the time, and it's just a really simple but very, very effective way of telling the story through color before color was a thing. But beyond all the special effects and all the amazing filmmaking leaps that this film took, which it did, I wouldn't care as much. I'd appreciate it, but I wouldn't care as much if there weren't a great story and really deep and provoking characters at the center of it. David Home as a character, yes, it's very Christmas Carol. I'm sure that Victor, yes, last name, I'm sure that he read A Christmas Carol and was like, sounds good. That sounds like a compelling character. This idea has been done before. Even in 1921, it had been done before in other media and maybe even in film as well. I don't know. I've not seen much films from before 1960. I still think, though, that the way they use David Holmes' character and the situations that they put him in and the general backstory of him is different enough where it was still really engaging. And there was a lot of surprises along the way. And this film is a lot darker compared to something like A Christmas Carol, which is, effectively the same idea, the same theme. But this film is a lot darker, a lot more grounded, despite the fact there's ghosts in it. And I just found that to be really, really interesting. A couple of other characters that are worthy of note. The Phantom is kind of just an agent of death that's just kind of walking around, and there's not much to him. He serves his purpose as what he is, but I don't care that there's not much to his character because his character serves the exact purpose that he needed to. Other characters I like, Mrs. Home, obviously very endearing. You attach a lot to this character because she's just trying to make everything work when The entire world seems to stand in her way. And by the entire world, I mean David and his shenanigans. Um, yeah, she's just an unfortunate character, but one that you definitely attach to. And it gets very tense, especially towards the end of the film, what happens with her character. And finally, easily the most lovable character in this film, and sort of tragic as well, is Edith. A character who never does anything wrong, does everything right, and yet the world still shits all over her. And I'm not going to spoil anything about Edith and what happens to her, but good person, and bad things happen to her. But it is done in service of David's character as well. You're supposed to love Edith, and you're supposed to, feel bad when bad things happen to Edith, because she is like the shining example of a great person. Final non-spoiler thought, I love the concept of the Phantom Carriage, so you might take this as a light spoiler. I'm just going to explain basically the rules behind the ghosts in the Phantom Carriage. So if you don't want to know that, just turn off the video, because I'm going to get into spoilers after this. But if you don't care about that, this isn't a spoiler for anything in the plot, it's just the idea of the Phantom Carriage and the narrative that it serves. So every year, the last person who dies on New Year's Eve becomes the new Phantom Carriage, and he has to spend, or she has to spend, the following year ferrying souls who have died into the afterlife. And then at the end of the following New Year's Eve, whoever dies at the end of New Year's Eve then has to take over the job for the next year. Okay, getting into full spoilers for the Phantom Carriage now. So I would absolutely recommend this film. It is really, really great. If you don't like silent films, if you find them grating, if you find them really hard to watch, yeah, this is a silent movie, I'm sorry. But if you don't mind silent films and you wouldn't mind trying it out, and if you kind of like this type of story about a man who has to reform himself and there's ghosts in it and shit, and just if you like watching these kind of old weird movies, especially around October because it's the spooky season, I would absolutely recommend this. And this is a pretty good film to watch even if you're not a fan of the old silent era where basically nothing happens for 2 hours. This is a good film to watch even if you're not a huge fan of that, of the silent era. So I would absolutely recommend it. Full spoilers ahead now. So there's the scene that is paid homage to in The Shining, which is probably the most famous thing about this film. There is the scene when David's wife locks him in a room because David is being a dick and being the worst human being. And so he grabs an axe and tries to chop down the door, and that is emulated in The Shining in the "Here's Johnny" scene. So that's just a little bit of housekeeping. That's just to show the influence that this film has. It's a very tense scene in the Phantom Carriage, when he's trying to knock down the door because you fear for the wife and kids' safety. It's great. The final sort of 20 minutes of the film really had me white-knuckled. I genuinely had no idea what was going to happen. For the context, Mrs. Holmes has just had enough. She's just sick of David torturing her. She is just fed up with life because she doesn't think it's really worth living. Her and her kids all have tuberculosis, so they're probably going to die anyway, but it seems that in this world everyone had tuberculosis anyway, so who gives a shit? And so she decides to poison herself and her kids just to escape this life of abject poverty and torture. And Ghost David knows this, and so he's like, can I go save them? And the Phantom's like, yeah, sure. So he resurrects David and is like, look, if you change and if you save them and if you promise to change, then you can live. And so he does. He does get back, he does save them, and he promises to be better. And then the film just ends. Those last 20 minutes when I didn't know would he make it in time to save his children, I genuinely had no idea what would happen. And when he does save his children, I genuinely got really, really emotional when he's talking to his wife and he's making these promises. At the end of the film, I did start to feel sort of empty in a way, where, in a good way though, I didn't know, would David change? I didn't know, would he actually be better? It's harrowing as well because they have tuberculosis anyway, so they're just going to be really sick for a while and then they're probably going to die anyway. But it was just really, really emotional, the ending, for me anyway. I talked to a few of my friends who saw the film as well because we were all in the same class, and they didn't take it the same way I did, but I don't know, it really hit me this time watching a film like this. I guess I just attached myself to these characters so much, and that I was really invested and really getting into it. I felt genuine fear when David saved his children and promised to be better. I love David's journey through the film. He's a very tragic and very engaging character. His journey is very engaging. I like how he opened with him being the prick that he is, and then when he's killed, he gets to see the outside perspective of that, which is a luxury that pretty much nobody has in real life. You don't get to see really, I mean you do sometimes, but generally people don't get to see the effect that their actions have on people, good or bad. And David gets to see that his actions have done nothing but bad for the world. He allowed his brother to go to prison. He tortured his wife and kids, and when they ran away, that only made him vengeful. When the one woman in the world who was willing to help him, he accidentally, I guess, gave her tuberculosis, and he spat in the face of the good deed that she did, despite her, taking great personal risk to do this small good deed. And he's just been an absolute terrible person. But there's something engaging about that too. You feel bad for the people around him and you just wish he would be better. And then when he finally does promise to be better, and when he realizes the effect that he's had on people, it's just a great triumphant moment for him because he's made such a personal change. And I think that's really, really nice. And I was happy that in general it was a happy ending. Of course, it's kind of ambiguous because it just closes on him saying he'd be better. It's not like A Christmas Carol where you see Scrooge and he's helping out Tiny Tim and he's doing all these nice things. All you have is David's word, and all the characters have is David's word that he'll get better. I'd like to think he does because I like a happy ending. Either way, I found it incredibly engaging. I found the women in the film to be really, really well done as well, especially for 1921. You're really attached to Edith and Mrs. Home. They're two characters who are very tragic. Pretty much everything's been against them throughout the entire film, and yet you still love seeing them go through life as best they can, especially Edith, because she only tries to do what's best for everybody. Edith's just always trying to do what's right, and that's what makes it so sad then when she's in bed dying. The final thing that I can say about the film that I just really loved is the concept. This idea of a ferryman ferrying souls from this life to the afterlife. Of course, that's a concept that's spread throughout mythology and religion, but I think they handle it very interesting here. I like how someone has the job for a year and then he gets to pass on. I don't know how to feel about the ending when David just gets resurrected. I think it would have been interesting if he had died and then had to take on the job after that, but it didn't really diminish the film for me. I still like the way it ended. I guess I was just expecting something different. So yeah, all in all, I absolutely loved the Phantom Carriage. If you're interested in silent cinema, I think this is a good one to start with. Again, my three favourites are this, Nosferatu, and The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. If you are looking to get into silent cinema, I would start with one of those three. I would definitely start with The Phantom Carriage though, especially in October because it's a bit of a spooky movie. A complaint that I heard among people in my class is that it doesn't lean into the horror very much, which I think is just part of expectation. So don't expect it to be ghosts all the time. It's not that. It is a character's personal journey and there's ghosts in it. But I still think it's a really good film to watch in October if you're into kind of ghosts and stuff like that. And especially, you know, like black and white silent films with ghosts in them. That's makes for great Halloween watching. So yeah, I would absolutely recommend this film if you're looking to get into silent cinema, silent horror cinema, or just horror in general. If you're just interested in this kind of story, this is a good film. You don't have to love silent cinema to love this film. I know, because I don't love silent cinema. There's very few silent films that I actually like. This is one of them. And it makes me interested in watching this filmmaker's other filmography. Apparently it's quite good. Victor Stostrom. I apologize. So, if you like this video and you want to see more horror content throughout the month of October, subscribe to see more videos. Traditional Kino Cave research scene. I always do my research while the camera is recording, because that's how much I care about you. You need to see the authentic Kino Cave experience. Okay, 1921.